Hi, good night, good night, good night. Have a happy Monday. And welcome to For the Hour. We are live in Tobago Updates Television Studios tonight on this wonderful Monday night. I know I always like Mondays because we always get to have another episode or another screen of For the Hour, right? And so we start the week off right with Tobago and Tobago's current events. And to me, that is a very fulfilling thing to do. So I'm always happy to come in on a Monday night, and start the week off right, set the tone off right for the week. We had had a very eventful weekend. Actually, we had the great race. Actually, coming down to the end of the July-August kind of vacation where everybody's relaxing and they're going to the beach. Where we had some rain, over the weekend, but still the proceedings went on. There was the race actually was completed. There was a winner, Mr. Solo. Congratulations to him, Mr. Solo too. Congratulations to the team. All right, and after that, well, this can be seen as the peak period for travel in between the islands, or between the air bridge and the sea bridge, right? But however, we have had a major hiccup in between the air bridge specifically with Caribbean Airlines, which is quite convenient, being now is the height of travel for this period of time over the past 3 months. We have a lot of activities coming down to the end of August. We have people ending up their vacation, so they have to go back home. Children have to go back to school. So, the travel in between Trinidad and Tobago is quite high during this period. And now we have had, which is still ongoing, debacle with the Caribbean Airlines, where the cockpit crew, as noted by Caribbean Airlines, has not shown up for work. Simultaneously, a number of the cockpit crew did not show up for work over the weekend, and is still ongoing, causing a number of cancellation of flights and chaos on the air bridge of Trinidad and Tobago. All right, so we're going to talk about that as well in the program. Going into the program, we also had a situation with our some situation coming out of the judicial matter between the courts and our Education Secretary, Miss Assemblyman Zorisha Hackett. All right, and so we have some kind of legal conundrum going on that we seek to discuss and try to air out to the public and, get the views of the panelists going through that. So, but before that, let me introduce the panelists to you before we go into tonight's discussion. First of all, we have Mr. John Prokop, who is an environmental activist. Mr. John Prokop is actually the guy who attempted to swim in between Trinidad and Tobago last week. All right, and I want to congratulate you on that effort, Mr. Prokop. All right. We also have Mr. Charles Smith, who asked me to call him Charles. He said he's preferred Charles, so I'll call him Charles. Welcome, Charles. Charles is the Tobago East Chairman of the Tobago Council of the PNM. And also we have Mr. Leroy George, looking really sharp and snazzy in his suit, right? No stranger to the show. Mr. Leroy George is a research writer and a political activist. Gentlemen, good night.
Good evening.
Good night.
Good night, good night, good night. And I always ask for your initial thoughts on, the topic at hand. First topic at hand, we have the turmoil at Caribbean Airlines, more so the pilots, the cockpit crew taking a sick out. We know generally they're not allowed. They're not allowed to take industrial action. It's against the law because they are essential workers. All right, but it's their form of silent industrial action. So we see a trend, or it's common quite, for essential workers such as the police or the fire service. They would take days off, which they are entitled to, simultaneously to disrupt operations, right? So I just want to get your initial thoughts on the proceedings over the weekend. I'm going to start with you, Mr. George.
As it pertains to Caribbean Airlines, I do not know the details of why employees did not show up to work. I know that it isn't extremely legal for them to strike. I don't know their work conditions are. What I do know is that things happen, right? And so I would not cast any blame. I can't blame THA because whilst the airport does fall underneath the Tobago House of Assembly, or should fall underneath the Tobago House of Assembly, they're not in charge of Caribbean Airlines. Central government are the main shareholders where that is concerned. I'm not too sure if we could even blame central government because, yes, the Tobago to Trinidad route would have been negatively affected, but Caribbean Airlines has a lot of planes, a lot of seats, and they do a lot of routes. So that situation could get complex. What I would say, though, is that this does speak specifically to Tobago's autonomy. And when we have discussions about Tobago's autonomy, we often talk about Tobago's autonomy as though it is something that we need to ask Trinidad for, right? One of the reasons why the air bridge is so important is because we have limited space on the sea bridge. A lot of people don't mind traveling via boat, the ferry, because it's not a very long trip. It's not a very uncomfortable trip, etc. And so they are dependent on the planes. And I always say, we have a situation which Pat, look, Iowa, George, he has a very big boat called the Sea Champion, could carry 300 human beings. Not a lot of people know that boat was built right here in Tobago by a Tobagonian, right? That is Brother George from Lowlands. Why aren't we gaining for ourselves our own autonomy where transportation is concerned by building more boats like that could service between Tobago and Trinidad, even taking a shorter route because these boats are smaller, they could move from even the Bonaccord Lagoon. I've seen the Sea Champion in the Bonaccord Lagoon, from the Bonaccord Lagoon jetty, it could get down to Trinidad in a quicker space, etc. Is it that we are addicted to always being dependent on outsiders? And I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to ask ourselves that question again. Why are we in the Tobago space not seeking to usurp for ourselves some autonomy where our ability to transport goods and services away from the island and towards the island is concerned?
All right, thanks so much for that. Mr. Charles, what's your views? What do you think about the debacle?
Edison, it's always unfortunate when persons who are in the employment of another person has to resort to those sort of machinations to get what is just and what is fair. Now, there are several things at play there at CAL, which we may not even recall, but CAL is supposed to be an organization, as was established after BWI, that is supposed to be self-sufficient. We just had the pandemic period where air flights were grounded, and a lot of persons forget that. And it would mean that as an organization, they would not have been making money. In fact, the airline industry throughout the world suffered a huge loss throughout the last 3 years or so. Coming out of that, here we have a group of persons, the pilots, and a lot of them had to go on furlough, right? Some of them had to have reduction in hours, reduction in pay, and those sort of things. And it's throughout the world that happened. But now you have a group of persons who have more or less held the country to ransom. And the last group of persons I remember doing that were the police service, total policing.
Total
Remember
policing,
that?
Yeah.
Yes, held the
But they
country.
actually do their job.
That is correct. Held the country to ransom.
Yeah.
And what CAL did, by having the pilots call in just before the shift, they called in sick. Utilizing that provision, because it's not a right. A sick leave is not a right.
It's a provision.
It's a provision in case something happens
Yes.
that and so they utilized that and held both islands to ransom. I'm not even certain if we have our own transportation system based in Tobago, if that solves the problem. It doesn't. What is really the issue is how we approach industrial relations in this country. Because it is not only CAL that has resorted to that measure. I have seen nurses do it, doctors do it, police, fire, prison. It seems as though this is the move when you are not legally allowed to take industrial action because you are deemed an essential service, you make this move to force the hand of the employer. It doesn't have to get to that. If we are truly a civil society where we care about each other, it shouldn't get to that. If we are a society where there is trust and honesty, where the management of CAL, because there's a board in place, would share with the pilots earnestly, listen, this is the truth of the situation. And what happens instead is that there's oftentimes distrust. And because there's distrust between the employer and the employee, then the employee seeks to use whatever cards they have to get the outcome that they desire. I look with bated breath to see what would be the outcome. Because what has happened in the past is that this sort of action has moved the hands of the employers. And that's why people would continue to do it.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate.
Because it gets results.
That is correct.
Yeah. All right, so Mr. Prokop, what are your views about the whole CAL situation, the standoff?
Well, I would say on the most basic level that people need to feel appreciated. And I can understand that the airlines have taken a huge hit. But at the same time, they should know better. They should have predicted that this would happen. And if they couldn't have predicted that this would happen, it means that intrinsically they're not really in touch with the workforce that makes up their operation. And everybody knows that the airlines cannot fly without the essential workers who operate them. So I would say that this is a very good example of what happens with many institutions in this country. It's not necessarily what you do, but it's more so how you do it. Right. And so even if it's difficult from a financial position to increase people's wages, there's ways that you can treat your staff. There's ways that you can talk with your team. And there's ways that you can show caring. And even in a situation where the economic challenges are significant, this can easily be done. And that's what the human interest is all about. And so I would say that CAL is to blame in this instance, and that they could have avoided this, and they could have avoided a lot of negativity that has now come on their plate, just by being a little bit more thoughtful, strategic, and a little bit more human.
Right. Yeah, and I love the fact that you bring up sometimes the problem doesn't always have to be solved with more economic power or more money. It's all about the treatment. And I don't want to be the one to dogpile on CAL here, but I have had my issues with CAL for a while now, in that, one, we understand that you are the sole airbridge provider in between the two islands, and it's basically you or the ferry, right? But the perception is very important in how we deal with the airbridge and how we treat Tobagonians in that whole thing. And the perception for me is that CAL does not always treat Tobagonians as if we are valued using that service, right? That's one. Two, I understand also the cost. The cost to fly. The cost has gone up significantly because they cut the amount of flights down since after COVID. So it's less flights now. But even though the economics dropped, the service has spiraled. It has spiraled to a depth where I can't even comprehend it, right? And I say I don't want to dogpile on Carl, but it's situations where I've flown on that airline, and the plane was absolutely disgusting. I found dirty diapers, like used diapers by my feet, right? And this was just last month. This is not long. It's not that long ago. You understand? So the service, and that doesn't take economic might to solve. It's just, again, people enjoying what they do and doing what they need to do, and employers valuing persons. Once you do that, people will understand, because everybody not buying right now. You understand? But we have the cost rising, the service is plummeting. At least the service should at least stay the same.
Well, Edison, we have to, let's be honest. It is difficult to really blame the board or management for issues like that on the plane. It is individuals who have to take pride in their job. And what my colleague here is saying is that because there has been a deterioration in the relationship between the employees and the employer, what has happened is that workers could more or less work the rule. They're no longer providing the quality service that they ought to. Now, I know that there are some airlines, my wife flew recently in Europe, and there are some airlines who tell you that this is the service you're going to get, but you're going to get it at such a price that you can't complain. All right?
And I could understand that.
All right. The challenge with Carl is this, that Carl is trying to provide a quality service on the air bridge while doing it at a loss. And that's a fact. It might be better for the governance structure of Carl to separate the entity into regional and international travel,
And
which is for
100%
profit,
agree with you there.
and have a service-based industry where we know that, listen, these flights to Tobago, it is a service
Public
being
service.
provided by the government with public servants. And then we now treat with them as public servants, demand that, listen, we know that our service that we expect, the service that we're expecting, it comes from the public purse. And so we expect, not only because we are spending money on the service, both ways,
Both ways.
right? Through governance and through our pockets, you have to do better. And we demand that you do better. But if it is simply an issue of us paying for a service, the price we pay for that service on Carl perhaps contributes to the quality of service that we get.
All right.
And the one thing that you don't want to do is cut corners with price when it comes to providing life support. Because let's not make a mistake. When you fly in a plane, you want to make sure that safety has been attended to properly and that no cost has been,
Yeah.
no cost has been cut.
At any point in time.
And we're very lucky.
Yeah.
We have had a service from British West Indian Airways all the way through to CAL, Caribbean Airlines, which from a safety perspective has been stellar and exemplary
Yes, indeed.
throughout the world. And this is something that we can be very proud of. And let's just hope that continues.
Continues, yes, despite. You see how they try to solve the issue, right? They had extra ceilings on the ferry. So I think the ferry just loaded up and left. When I was coming to studio, the ferry was loading up to go down to Trinidad. And so they took persons with confirmed tickets and they put them on the ferry. Now,
And they reimburse them?
and I was going to ask a question, come to me. If you do the simple maths, a plane ticket is way more than a ferry ticket.
A plane ticket is way more than a
Yeah,
ferry ticket.
way more. It's like
Yeah.
there's a difference of $125 there. And to me, I mean, you all think that's good enough on CAL behalf? Should they do some reimbursements there?
It's not a major issue in my book, honestly speaking, right? I hear us talking about how important it is that Carl does a better job and all of those intricacies, etc. However, this is Tobago Updates, right? This is a Tobago media outlet. And I am not that interested in speaking about the issues of Tobago in a way where outsiders, because even central government doesn't deal with our day-to-day activities here in the Tobago space, right? In a way which part we're leaning on even Trinidad or anything outside of Tobago to deal with. And let me just explain what I'm talking about, right? Because I don't think people understand how sinister this situation could get. We have the two ferries, right? The Buku Reef and the APT James. Not a lot of people know that the company that financed the building of those two ferries is an Australian-owned company, right? Owned not by Australian private citizens, but the government of Australia. And according to the Constitution of Australia, they cannot invest money in anything that does not provide employment opportunities, high-earning employment opportunities for Australians. And so even though these ferries work between Tobago and Trinidad, you will never see, never, a Tobagonian or a Trinidadian as captain or second in command on these vessels.
Right.
They will always be Australian. And so you would have a situation where persons working on these ferries, right, would be accustomed to looking up at outsiders. And I'll be very frank, of a different level of melanin to us. And that could have an effect on how we look at ourselves in the country. And to consider that in our conversations, we never speak about how Tobago could address our own transportation issues. You would notice that I was even willing to forego contributing a second time into the conversation. Because if we're not going to be addressing our problems, if we're not going to free ourselves from the mental slavery that says that the solution has to come from outside of Tobago, then I'm not interested in the conversation, to tell you the honest all truth. I'm interested in Carl solving the situation and all of that. And one thing, if I have to say anything about the Carl situation, people are saying it's not profitable, right? Us paying $400 two-way, etc., is not profitable, and that's why we're getting a lower service. I'm going to disagree with that sentiment. And the reason why I'm going to disagree with that sentiment, Carl is predominantly owned by central government. Central government is funded by the people of Trinidad and Tobago, by taxpayers. And so, even if the money does not go back to Carl, the Carl operating efficiently creates a situation where the gross domestic product in Tobago is increased when they operate efficiently. And in Tobago, when they do not operate efficiently, you heard a lot of the domestic tourists saying they're not going to be returning to Tobago again for visiting. Tobago has a gross domestic product of 1.75 billion according to the present finance secretary and his predecessor, right? Whilst we have a budget coming from central government of 2-point-something billion dollars, I don't even know how that is possible that our gross domestic product could fall below our central government allocation. While Trinidad has such a vibrant private sector, and it's not nowhere near the best in the world, right?
But it's more.
That their GDP dwarfs the funding that they get from government. And I think what we need to do is emancipate ourselves from that way of thinking of being dependent all the time, whether it be on the government, whether it be on outsiders, etc., and start looking towards ourselves as the originators and as the solvers of our own problems.
Well, Edison, if I may, there are a couple of things that I would like to augment based on what my goodly brother said. Firstly, the decision that the Australian government has taken is until the loans are paid off, because it's a loan, right?
Yeah.
After the loan is paid off, then you really fully own
The boat.
That is correct. And you can do whatever you want with it, including employment of whoever you want.
Well, let me augment your augmentation.
So that's the first thing, is until
Until the loan's paid off.
that is correct. Then you could do whatever you want with your asset,
And I
because
would
the
like-
asset becomes yours. The second thing I would like to say is that I don't want us to oversimplify the issue with CAL. And we know that during the peak season, CAL runs very efficiently, and there is enough persons to go both ways sometimes. But generally, outside of the peak season, I have traveled, and I used to travel very often. At that time when I was studying in Trinidad, I would travel each month. I'm on the plane, and there are many days it's 5 hours on the plane,
Right. Yeah.
and that is a reality.
Yeah.
So when you talk about efficiency and those sort of things, let's be honest. If you run a CAL as a business, specifically the air bridge in Tobago, many of us, we'll be very unhappy with the decisions that they take. Right? And so we need to recognize that really and truly, it is a service that is being offered by the government of Trinidad and Tobago, which is what we need. We need a service. We don't want you to run a business.
Right.
Because if you run it as a business between Trinidad and Tobago, us as Tobagonians, we would suffer. And I don't want that. That's the first thing I would say. In terms of solutions to the challenges that we face, my recollection is that this is the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. When I look at my passport, driver's permit, I see citizen of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And so whenever I speak to solutions, I do not speak Tobago-centric, because I do not believe that as Tobagonians, we have all the answers to everything that may be challenging us even now. I believe that as a country, as an island supported by Trinidad, that we can provide meaningful solutions to challenges that we might face, including the problem of transportation on the sea and air bridge. I believe that that should be our approach. I believe our approach should be collaborative and not combative. I believe that if we approach things in that way meaningfully and being honest, we can get solutions that would be to the benefit of us in Tobago as well as our overall country.
You know, I could not agree more. I could not agree more. We just had the Great Race,
Yes.
which is the longest running powerboat race on the planet. And we are the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And Trinidad doesn't have all the answers, and Tobago doesn't have all the answers. So in the same vein, as my comments on the disconnect between CAL, management, board of directors, employees, it's a similar disconnect that we have to fix. We have to reconnect, and we have to utilize our strengths, because together we are strong, but divided we will fall.
If I may address...
You could go and then we'll go to break, right?
Right. If I may address Mr. Charles' statement about the loan, right? For the two ships. The reality of the situation is, in its present state, those vessels have a life expectancy. Of course, you could change parts and extend the life expectancy. The amount of time it's going to take us to pay off that loan, I've done the research already, is 2 decades.
Right.
Right?
20 years.
20 years to pay off that loan. And this would not be the first time, even after that 20 years has been completed, and that boat is past the halfway mark of its expectancy as is, right? This would not be the first time we're dealing with this situation here, whereby the persons at the helm or higher levels in the employment are foreigners, and the persons at the bottom and local persons. And then you have a transition period, because it has happened already with the vessels that existed previous to these two, right? Where now to transition to have those persons at the lower level come to the top, you now have a situation where the boat cannot function as efficiently because they have become entrenched in a situation whereby they are not prepared to take over. So added to that 20 years, you have even an extended period for them to retrain. And I would remind, and this is what I would close with, I remind everybody of what happened in Zimbabwe. When there was an agreement, right, the Lanchester Agreement, which part the whites were allowed to continue to own the land, and they were supposed to train the blacks to take over after a period, I believe, of the same 20 years. And what happened is that the whites took the opportunity, just as we had with the boats that were predecessor to these two that we have now.
Right.
They took the opportunity to ensure that the locals in Zimbabwe were not able to take over. And so you had a situation where hyperinflation took place and you had inefficiency on a large scale, and they were able to now turn and look at the black Zimbabwean and say, you are incapable of doing what we are doing. And so I am going to state again, yes, it is Trinidad and Tobago, but if Trinidad and Tobago is to have an efficient relationship that is symbiotic in nature, then Tobago must be able to depend on itself as much as Trinidad could depend on itself. Tobago must be standing on its own 2 feet, while Trinidad is standing on its own 2 feet. And with 4 feet, we move forward together. But so long as we operate as a ward, we will become second-class citizens in this environment. So don't get comfortable at all.
Gotcha. We had to take a break, right? So we had to take a break, we pay some bills. When we come back, we continue the discussion. And we also have other topics to discuss as well. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Tobago, after freeness is more speed and better TV. Get a free Samsung smartphone and free installation, plus 200 megabits per second, Paramount Plus, and more for only $299 with a select 200 plan from Flow. Visit online at discoverflow.co today.
Right now, Tobagonians are just currying down to Bonaccord, right in Strawberry Local Road. You know why? To come down and shop at Authentic Builders General Hardware, the only hardware store in Tobago that is giving you guys Trinidad prices. So for instance, such as steel, 1/2 inch and 5/8, $7,895. 5/8 construction ply for $260. Every single thing that you will need to do your home renovation or start your new construction, we have it right here. And to get your quotation, it's very easy. Just WhatsApp us at 272-1990 and we will do your free WhatsApp quotation for you.
Jimmy's Holiday Resorts has 1, 2, and 3 bedroom, fully self-contained apartments located at the heart of Crown Point. Minutes walk to the popular beaches, restaurants, bars, and the airport. Enjoy our amazing amenities such as fully equipped apartments, complete with Wi-Fi, AC, TV, and a pool, and a mini-mart on the compound. Call 639-8292 or 8929. Jimmy's Holiday Resorts is your family's home away from home.
Everybody only worrying. Never ever worry. Don't mind how things looking hard. I tell them never ever worry. If your nice can't get damaged bad. I tell them never ever worry. What I'm saying is true. So just consider Tatil is always right here for you. I tell them never ever worry. Don't mind if life make you sad. I tell them never ever worry. If your house get flooded out real bad. I tell them never ever worry. What I'm saying is true. So just consider Tatil is always right here for you. I tell them never ever worry. If sickness catch you off guard. I tell them never ever worry. If times fall on you real hard. I tell them never ever worry. What I'm saying is true. So just consider Tatil will always be here for you. Never worry about a thing. Tatil, where people are people. You know what I mean.
From the experts that created the Zinger sandwich comes the KFC Crispy Barbecue Zinger. Cheddar cheese, crispy onions, the most most delicious Kentucky Fried Chicken and barbecue sauce. Get ready for a whole new level of flavor.
And we're back. And we continue the discussion tonight on where we just wrapped up our conversation on Caribbean Airlines and the debacle that happened over the weekend. And we want to continue the discussion tonight with the situation that currently is present within our THA, where the courts have charged one of our secretaries and a high-standing staff member of the Tobago House of Assembly, one of the divisions of the Tobago House of Assembly, with not cooperating in a pending investigation. All right? Recently, we have learned that the court has granted a stay on proceedings, on criminal proceedings, on the matter as it relates to our Secretary of the Division of Education, Research and Technology, Assemblyman Zorisha Hackett. All right, and just to clear this up or to define as what a stay on proceedings means, it means a temporary hold or indefinite hold on the prosecution or on the case. All right, and so that stay is pending a judicial review and a challenge on the Communications Act 13, the Act 13 of 2020 Communications Act, right? So we want to hear that out tonight for Tobagonians, so that we can really explain, right, and obviously get the views on the panel here about what that situation means and how does it affect us going forward, all right? So we're going to start off with Leroy. You know, Leroy always tells me he had the Constitution, he have it in his heart. He don't only have it on paper, he don't have it on the phone, but he have it in his heart as well. Always, you know, he's a man of the country, and, you know, he has the law of the country upon his heart. You have the Bible on your heart like that?
No. Not at all.
You should be working on that, Leroy. Come on now.
Come on, Leroy, man.
As you already
law
know,
was made by man.
Come on now. Come on.
As you already know, while the Bible is my favorite book, I'm very anti-religious because I'm very pro-God. Okay. Anyhow,
go ahead.
As you say, I love the Constitution. Let's jump straight into the Constitution, right? Mm-hmm. We're talking about the Interception of Communication Act. Mm-hmm. Right? The Interception of Communication Act states very clearly that the court has the ability to tell Ms. Zorisha Hackett, the assemblywoman for her area and also the Secretary for Education, to put in her password so that the police could get into there and see the information so that they can continue with their investigation, right? They could also tell Mr. Kevon McKenna the same thing. But I want to focus on Zorisha Hackett for a while. And the reason for that being is because unlike Kevon McKenna, who is a regular civilian, Ms. Zorisha Hackett is an elected official and should be operating as such, meaning to say we should be seeing some social responsibility being executed by the young lady, right? That being said, the argument that is being put forward is that it infringes on her right to not self-incriminate, right? That's the argument put forward, right?
By her legal team?
By her legal team. They know that argument is going to fail in court. You know why it's going to fail in court? Because if you look at Section 6 of that same act, you will see that whatever the police find on her phone cannot be used as evidence against her or anyone else in court. The only reason, right, they even have that law that allows you to go into that phone is so that they could get trends or what is the word I'm looking for? They could get clues as to where they could go next so that they could find evidence that would be applicable in the court system. And they know this, right?
So give me an example. So if there is a mention of a particular document or a payment
Right.
within the phone,
Yes.
the police could then use that to go and find the document and then use the document in court.
That's absolutely correct. There is
Okay.
no need to build on that whatsoever.
Okay.
Right? And where my indignation kicks in is, again, and I keep saying it, the way we look at white collar crime versus blue collar crime. Because this situation is being handled by the same judicial system that deals with blue collar criminals.
Okay.
We have blue collar criminals in remand for many, many years that are not able to have their cases heard in court because we have a bottleneck of cases, right? And some of these cases are unnecessary and exist, as in this specific case, this white collar crime case, exists specifically to waste time, right? Because they know it's going to get kicked out for the exact reason that I just gave. But if you look at the Prevention of Corruption Act, you will see that the police have a limited amount of time to bring this case to its conclusion.
Okay.
And so they are basically trying to infringe on the police ability to get to the bottom of this situation.
Okay.
And by tying up the judicial system, those poor, unfortunate blue collar, I can't even call them criminals because they haven't even been tried as yet. But those accused of blue collar crime that are not secretaries that have the best lawyers in the world, etc.,
In the country.
has to stay in remand. And remand is worse conditions than regular prison conditions, right? Because these are the prisoners who now coming in or now coming out, right? Tend to be in that type of facility, have to stay in these inhumane conditions because somebody who did not need the money, who did not need whatever she and Mr. Augustine, the chief secretary, intended to benefit from the criminal act that they committed according to Section 3 of the Prevention of Corruption Act, decided to be idle and decided that they are entitled, and entitlement is the number one thing that causes crime so far as I'm concerned. They are entitled to engage in white-collar criminal activity because society does not look at white-collar crime in the way they look at blue-collar crime.
Okay.
I'm indignant, and I'm hoping that the people of Tobago would raise their voices and say, Ms. Zoisha Hackett, you are an elected official and we expect better of you.
Right.
Please just give the police their password and stop holding up our judicial system here in Trinidad and Tobago.
Question though, is it on this with the stay of proceedings? Is that something that, because the stay of proceedings came because there was a challenge on the law that was being used to charge, right? Is it that the court has to take up that challenge, or is it is an option? Is it optional for the court, or they have to take it up?
So usually, you would bring your case in front of the judge or the magistrate, and then they would give you leave to pursue the judicial review. So it doesn't happen automatically.
Okay.
You have to bring it. They have to think that there's sufficient substance in your argument, and then they give you the opportunity to put a stay on the proceedings, and then to have judicial review. You review the law.
Okay.
Right. So that's basically where they are.
Okay.
But it's not automatic.
Right.
The challenge that I have and that I would share with you, Leroy, is this: education without morality tends to corruption. And that's a real challenge that we are faced with. So you would have elected officials, and we elect them because we believe they have high moral standards. And so even though there are loopholes in systems and those sort of things, that they would not exploit them to do wrong and to engage in corrupt practices. The challenge is that on a day-to-day basis, we are seeing a lowering of the moral standards. Until the point where we have commonly grown to accept that politics have a morality of its own. Have we heard that before? Which is really scary, because it means that as a politician, you could do whatever you want and get away with it. And I'm saying that that is unacceptable. Let's remember why we are here. We are here because of an audio tape that alleges there was conspiracy between the chief secretary and the secretary for Education, Research and Technology, and other members to hire persons corruptly and to have them work on behalf of a political entity. That's why we're here. And so the police, receiving that audio tape, decided to investigate the matter and would have had warrants to get the devices to see, hey, is there truth in this? And so they would have asked the good lady to provide the device and to provide access to the device. And so now she did not comply. And so the court is making an effort to ensure that she complies with the instruction by the warrant so that we can investigate the matter. And she's saying, no, I'm not going to allow you to investigate the matter. So that is where we're at, where an elected public official is saying, no, I will not allow you to investigate the matter fully. In fact, I'm willing to go to court to have the piece of legislation that permits you to investigate in that way reevaluated so as to invalidate it, to allow me to keep the information that would possibly incriminate me. This is a scary place.
Yes.
Right, very scary.
And of course, in so doing, she appears guilty to everyone.
You could say that because
I mean,
to hide.
Well, exactly. If you have nothing to hide, usually, at least in my experience, people tend to be very urgent and desperate to clear their name because they want people to know that they did not do it. But in this case, she looks guilty. And by looking guilty, she represents her organization as looking guilty. And it's unfortunate, and actually I think it's a bit tragic, because in a way, we have a David and Goliath situation on our hands between this brave young force that was able to topple an administration that has ruled as if royalty over our land for so long, and this brave new force that shows the country that democracy is alive and that our vote counts and that there can be change. They are now up against a giant. And little David against very large Goliath needs a stone to triumph. And that's exactly what this is, at least in my eyes.
Right. I got you.
I am so glad Mr. Prokop brought up that David and Goliath and stone analogy, right? Because, okay, you look at David, and Rowley is the big Goliath, and he's the bad one, and he's wrong. But guess what? David picked up the wrong stone. In this case, David picked up the stone of lawlessness, right?
So you think that was not the way
He could have picked up the stone of lawfulness. He could have picked up the stone of lawfulness and gone down the right road, but he chose not to go down the right road. And I love the fact that we heard of the utopian imagery that this new administration brought into the minds of supporters of theirs, right? And to see that now even the supporters have to look at them and say, look, she's looking guilty. And we are not to jump over what Mr. Charles Smith said, right? Because I would have forgotten what he said, right? But when you look at the interpretation of the Interception of Communications Act, this act is not an act that was created to look at specifically this case, you know. This act was created, amongst other things, to fight against terrorism, to fight against crime, to fight against situations where you may have illegal guns, etc., right? And for this individual who we had was part of a team that we had such high expectations from when it comes to governing with a higher level of morality than what we were accustomed to now want to throw away that entire act. And in so doing, remove the security that it gives us as citizens and the ability that it gives those who protect us in the TTPS from executing their duties and exposing us to violence, literal violence, and all the other things that blue-collar crime brings that we tend to be more quick to be indignant about, I think we really need to calibrate our moral standing as a people.
It's very worrying.
And ask our
Very
government
worrying.
or THA administration to do the same.
All right, well, guys, let me interject here. Private effects, a phone, a cellular phone, I always say, right, is a private effect. More so, the stuff that you could find on your cellular phone, your private phone, was not really company, but your private phone, right? It speaks to the person that you are in general, right? Your deepest thoughts, what your deepest, most communications to people that hold near and they're close to you or whatever. I am not sure, and I'm talking about me and personally, even though I am not guilty of any crime, right? I am not sure I'm going to willingly give over my personal phone
I tell you
to
what.
the police force.
I tell you what. This is my phone. I turned off the volume so it wouldn't disturb, right? But this is my phone. It doesn't have a password on it. But then again, I'm like a chimpanzee on a keyboard, and I'm not on social media.
Right.
But I am on WhatsApp. And this phone here has no password on it, but you could keep it for me. Keep it warm. I'll check it tomorrow.
But
it would be great.
Yes, well, which is great for you, Mr. Prokop. But it might
Then
not
I would
be.
go home, and the lovely lady that I live with would be so happy to have my full attention.
Right.
There
But-
you go. And
But then again,
But let
we
me
have
throw
a-
let me throw a spin ball in there. But what if these people, and it's very common these days, suppose they have a sex tape on their phone,
Listen,
and they're afraid that the police
police
will.
can't
listen,
have
there
these
is
kind of
nothing.
things on their
There is
phone.
nothing wrong. Didn't somebody say that sex is natural, sex is fun?
Yeah, of course
Yeah,
it is.
but I mean, having that
at-
exposed
At
to the public is not.
At the end of the day,
not the best thing.
if you are trying to show that you are innocent in the eyes of the law, you know, I think that you have a responsibility to the law and to your fellow person as well as to yourself to prove your innocence.
Right.
Yeah.
You see?
And to address your immediate concern, right? Which is that we're looking at a possible infringement on privacy. This act was so well put together. I just want to give a round of applause to the persons that put together this act because it protects you from exactly what you're speaking
Absolutely.
about.
Absolutely.
When you look at the act, if the information that the police gets from this act is given to anybody, the media, private person, or whoever, the punishment that those persons who would have acquired that information that were not supposed to acquire that information would gain is very heavy.
Okay.
I think we're looking at $500,000 fine, and if memory
I
serves me
think it's
correct,
6 years imprisonment. Or
6
something
years imprisonment.
Okay.
Right? So there is no possibility whatsoever that if they have some personal situations on their phone, it is going to end up to John Public. Right? So there is no reason and there is no possibility also, as I would have made mention before, that they could implicate themselves with information on the phone because nothing that is on the phone is going to be applicable in court. Just as we see the chief secretary, sometimes he tell you it was a THA executive council meeting so that he could get protection. And then when he want us to listen to Akil Abdullah, he turn around and say, no, it was a PDP executive council meeting. These are just putting it out there. These are the kind of safe havens that blue-collar criminals don't get. I don't know why we're giving the white-collar criminals these kind of stuff.
Edison.
And there is no excuse whatsoever for her not handing up her password other than the fact that she's trying to hold back the whole progress. She is infringing on the police ability to get to the bottom of
And
the
he's saying there
situation.
is a
She's
deadline.
not only looking guilty, but she is also, it seems to me, aiding and abetting, possibly in assisting other persons who may be guilty of wrongdoing from being found out.
And you said there is a deadline for this investigation to
From my first glimpse at the Prevention of Corruption Act. It's a very short act at which people would go and read it. It's only about 69 pages or so.
We have
Right?
it in
One
the
of the
heart,
shortest. I have it right in my heart. But it's in the backside of the hat to the point which part. You can't quote me on it, right?
You're right.
But yeah, they have about a year or so
Okay.
to come to a conclusion. About 2 months of that would have passed already.
Go ahead, John.
Leroy, you know, a wise person once told me that there are always rats. Anywhere you go where you can find people, you will find rats. Rats are the only mammals who have extended their range and increased in their numbers as human civilization has grown. And their numbers and their range has increased proportionately with the growth of human civilization. So a wise person once told me that there will always be rats.
Right.
However, when you see rats, when you start seeing the rats, that's when you know that there is an overpopulation problem.
Gotcha.
Right.
That was a Queen Council lawyer.
Leroy, you have an inside track on my information.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
That was a Queen Council lawyer.
But what that would really mean is that, in the truest sense, this is indicative of the society that we are in now.
Yes.
Because it is commonly said, the people get the leadership that they deserve. And so it means that even as a society, we need to look at ourselves and say, where are we in terms of our morality and our moral standing? Now, the Chief Secretary of himself would have said that we are going to tie them up in the court. He's quoted as saying that.
Okay.
And so it means that the action is deliberate in trying to stymie the process towards coming to the truth.
Right.
And if our leaders are willing to say something like that, it's worrying. It speaks to the moral decadence our society is heading towards, because the leaders set the tone for the
rest of the
direction your
society.
society is
Right,
going to
gotcha.
go. And this is what is worrying for me. Very worrying.
All right,
But,
guys,
Just said that too.
look at the time. we have elapsed a whole hour of 40 hour, right? But
Imagine
very enlightening, very enlightening discussion. I tell you, it is fly fast. It
Yeah.
flies really fast, right? Before you know it, we're around the table twice an hour past. Yeah. But I want to thank you guys so much. I want to thank Tobago for joining us tonight on In Tobago Updates Television Studios for another live episode of 40 Hour. Next week, we're going to come back. We're going to continue with our enlightening discussions on the things that are pertinent to Tobago today. All right. But until then, my name is Edison Thomas. Thank you, panel. And until next week, I bid you adieu.
All right. Have a blessed night.